Well, thank you everybody so much for being here with me. And I'm going to try to make it the shortest and the sweetest session that you've had so far at GALA, and maybe till the end. And just to explain a little bit the rationale of why we're here, right? I think the initial title was fancier. It was like how to transform your translation agency into a multilingual engagement agency. Regardless of the words, I think that the challenge is still the same. The challenge is how do we still maintain relevance in the world, not just in its current form, but where it's heading. And a few different things, right? I was actually just talking to Peter just outside about this, about how we're just getting started on our AI journey. This is a slide from McKinsey, and I know that McKinsey publishes some crazy stuff, but this actually makes a lot of sense. And the reason why I like this is not because of the actual data that's here. I like it because they're looking at 2070, and I'll be dead by then. But the important part for me is we're unbelievably at the beginning of something new, and that's really important as far as the mindset goes. Because if we understand that whatever's happening is not just unstoppable, but will get way bigger and way more adopted and way more developed, that allows us to prepare for the future, in my opinion, much better. And we've been trying to be in touch with people. We run surveys. We talk to hundreds of agencies all around the world. And we're running a survey. And by the way, we'd love to have your answers as well. So if you'd like to scan the QR code and answer this survey. But we're trying to see how AI adoption is impacting translation agencies and freelancers all around the world. And this is just a sneak peek of what we have so far. Most people clearly are increasing their adoption of AI tools in their services, in their processes. But that's kind of also the provocation of why we're here. It's a little bit of a question on what that looks like. So when we look at where we are right now, we did a study on 40 million words using BureauWorks context sensitivity, which is our idea of what AI looks like. And it's basically being able to work with models without having to train them and benefit from them. And what's happening is, on average, with every 100 words that get processed by a professional translator in BureauWorks, they're changing, on average, 11 of them. And that's pretty significant, right? That means that, on average, AI is 89% there, and that's regardless of the content type. So that this includes marketing, copywriting, this includes pharmaceutical, legal. It includes content that doesn't necessarily easily translate with machine translation, right? So, and this is getting better by the week. It's getting better by the month. It's definitely getting progressively better and more impactful. And what I see, and this is perhaps why I changed the title of the presentation today, is that I see that there's too much focus on embellishing product offering through AI. So changing the messaging, changing bits and pieces of the process, like maybe doing something special around pre-translation, or maybe having an LQA process that's special around AI. But there's too little focus on rewiring the core infrastructure. And this to me is, if I can leave everybody with one thing, this is the thing, because rewiring the core infrastructure of a company is hard, it's painful, it's a very complicated process, and most people avoid it till the very end because it is so hard. And at the same time, it's the most rewarding one. And rewiring may involve changing people's positions, changing people's roles, letting people go. It's a very uncomfortable process. It involves changing the way you pay your translators. It involves messing around with the stuff that was working for the past 20 years, was just fine, and now all of a sudden you have to rewire it. So most people avoid this till the very end. They'll focus on this. So yeah, now we're running our OQA process through this model. We're doing this through that model. So they're sprinkling little bits and pieces of AI and not fundamentally changing things. And that creates a big problem, right? Because this is what we're seeing coming from particularly our enterprise implementations. AI magnifies all of our inefficiencies, right? And it demands scale. So for the first time, this is, at least for me, definitely something new. For the first time, I see actually executives questioning, not just rhetorically, like actually questioning, why does this take so long? Why does this cost so much? Why should I even be doing this? So there's a lot of questioning around why people are translating in the first place, and that's coming from people pretty high up in the orgs. It's coming from C levels, VP levels, and that's putting a lot of pressure already on the localization buyers to figure things out, which consequently puts a lot of pressure on the translation agencies to figure this out. And this is a real enterprise use case that I'm bringing to everybody just so that we have an idea. So we're working with a client that processes 100 million processed words a year in BureauWorks. It's pretty much a big amount of content. Only 1% of this content is being currently routed through agencies. And we're not talking about like, support content. We're talking about HR, we're talking about e-learning, we're talking about legal, we're talking about compliance. We're talking about content that people normally would say doesn't go through AI. And they're doing this right now. This is 2025. And the reason why they're doing this is they're going through their own buyer dilemma conundrum. And their buyer dilemma is, especially coming from executives that aren't privy necessarily to all the complexities around what localization looks like and why it's so important and why it's so messy, so delicate. They're thinking, well, do I need AI that's good enough and is $0 right now? Or should I hire an agency that's going to be great, but it's going to cost me $200 and it's going to be 2 days from now? And when that's the dilemma posed to a lot of the buyers, it's not super surprising that they'll choose AI that's just good enough, right? And in my opinion, translation agencies and us as tool providers, we're here to try to create an alternative route for them. We're here to try to provide a viable path forward. And the viable path forward from a business perspective is you have to close the cost-benefit gap, right? Because if they're choosing between 0 and 200, and right now in 2 days, you're not giving them very much of a good choice, right? They're choosing between a rock and a hard place, and they're probably going to go with the $0 unless it's something absolutely critical. But if we can close the cost-benefit gap, a lot of that content that's, in that case, for instance, the 99% of the 100 million words, so 99 million words that aren't going through a human, may go through a human, probably will go through a human. And this, for instance, is the optimal scenario. So it's not $200 2 days from now, it's $20 and it's two hours from now. Now, and this I'm talking from the buyer's position, right? That's what they want. They want $20 and they want it 2 hours from now. And the challenge is, translation agencies currently, at least all of the ones that I know, and I've spoken at least to 300 different agencies in the past year and a half, and all of the ones that I know, they're not wired to produce translations that cost $20 and are going to be 2 hours, delivered 2 hours from now. And there's tooling for this. There are things that can be done that will allow you to do that, but this will require a lot of change. For instance, let's say for instance in this $200 task, maybe the translator was making $100. Well, now maybe they're going to have to make $10 on that same task. And that's going to be something hard for them to swallow. From a timing perspective, maybe before you had a project manager who was looking at the task and was thinking about who they'd like to send it to, or maybe they're using some kind of system that at least pre-selects the translators. But that's still also going to be problematic because 2 hours from now means that nobody can even touch it. And also means from a vendor management perspective, you're going to have way more people available to take these tasks really, really quickly. So this scenario, it puts a huge squeeze on vendor management, on production management, on operational management. And the squeeze is so big that you can't handle it through process alone. Like our industry is fascinating because it's so process intensive, because everything is all about exceptions and language is all about exceptions, and I really appreciate it. I think that's all beautiful. But it's that level of exception management thinking isn't compatible anymore, at least in my opinion, with what buyers want. This is compatible with what buyers want, and this demands a real restructuring of how companies work. And the goal here is to make it easier for the buyer to decide, right? That's the goal. You at least you're giving them a viable option. You're not telling them that it's either 0 or 200. You're giving them a viable option. And to do that, this is what I propose that is the solution. You need to go from process first to software first. And that's a huge, huge, huge challenge, because I have these conversations over and over again. Every agency that I talk to is process first. They have a process for everything. They have a process for receiving a file. A lot of them are ISO certified, which means that not only they have the processes, but they have them documented and they're audited on them. And it's all a process first mentality. And the project managers, they know their processes, and they have a file QA checklist, and they have another checklist that they use when they send a file, and they have processes for when things go wrong and processes to document things. There's a process for the process, right? It's a process first thing. That's just what it is. Running an agency is a very process intensive thing. I really appreciate it. But process first companies aren't compatible with a world that's becoming software first. In our world, whether we want to or not, it's not going away. It's just being swallowed by technology. And that's not necessarily something bad if you're willing, in my opinion, to work with it. If you fight it, I don't think again, this is just my honest opinion. I think that if you fight it, if you resist it, yeah, sure, maybe you can hold on to it for a few years. Maybe it's a very specific niche that for very specific reasons we'll hold on to it. But as a general rule, you can't fight the forces that we're talking about at play. We're talking about the entire techno-capitalistic engine that's driving through our very lawn. So it's like there's no changing this. And the key, there's a very fundamental difference here. To be software first, it's not that difficult from a conceptual perspective. You just look at the software. And the problem is a lot of the software that we have out there is process first, and that's why people love it. So for instance, a process first software is all about fields, and it's all about exceptions, and it's all about, for instance, looking at these fields and maybe saying, yeah, maybe I need an extra field because this tax situation requires an extra exemption, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the software is by definition not going to be as flexible as the process. Software is more rigid. It's harder to put in rules into software. The benefit is that when you think about software, you're not thinking about exceptions. You're thinking about things that you can repeat and rinse over and over and over again. So for instance, if you have a software-first approach to translations and you're allowing an algorithm to place your task with your vendors, that's great because nobody's going to have to touch it and it's going to be placed with your vendors. But the problem is that it won't be as peculiar as maybe your favorite project manager who knows that Isabel is going to be the exact person that they want for that job because it's rainy and because they saw their cat today and they were scared. So you're not going to do that with algorithmic task placement, but at the same time, you're going to gain huge levels of improvement. And again, I want to emphasize that, right? It's not using software. Every agency I know uses software. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about thinking about the software first and not the process first. And there's a huge difference there. So where I'm talking about, this is where I think agencies need to be in to be relevant in 2025. And this is just 2025. I mean, I'm not even talking about 2030. I'm just talking about 2025. I'm talking about full automation. When I mean automation, I mean real automation. I mean a client updates their quotes onto your portal. I mean, they get a quote in runtime. They make a decision. They move forward with that quote. That quote gets placed with the vendors without a single project manager lifting a finger. Those actions performed by the translators are transformed automatically into payables. The work that was done gets transformed automatically into receivables. You're providing the minimum edit distance. I can't emphasize how important that concept is, because if you're working with large edit distances, that means that you're overdoing the work. Very curious. When we look at BureauWorks, for instance, we have translators that are changing as little as 1% of the text, which is pretty bad. And we have translators who are changing 77% of the text, which is also terrible, which translators don't know how to even begin working with this technology and this paradigm. They don't understand what good enough looks like. I speak to translators all the time. I was at the ATA speaking to a room full of 200 translators who wanted to chop my head off with an axe. And I defended myself. I'm still here. But the challenge is for them, it's very hard to accept this idea that they're no longer translators, they're editors. And for me, editing has always been a noble thing. It's a good thing. They hate it. They're like, I like to translate. I like to think things my way. Fuck good enough. I don't care about good enough. I want my way. I'm like, well, you can have your way and become a poet, but if you want to be a translator, you're going to have good enough. So these are really, really hard conversations. Most translators are with agencies for 10, 15, 20 years. It's not I just want to emphasize how much I appreciate that all of this stuff as easy as it is, like in our software, you can do this literally like in a month of setup, you'll get here. The challenge is the change management part. It's brutal. It's brutal talking to your project managers. It's brutal talking to your vendors. It's brutal changing what people do. You're messing with people's identities. You're messing with people's sense of value, sense of self-worth, sense of job security. So behind all of this simplicity is like a hornet's nest of complexity. And that's my opinion. That's why all of us have so much value, because this is very hard. It looks really simple and it's like really nice slide, blah, blah, blah. This is brutally hard. And I think the more we recognize how hard that is, that actually shows what the value of a translation agency is. Getting this to work, even with the perfect software, is something incredibly difficult. And the thing is, getting to software first approach is just the very beginning. The challenge is then, how do you move your entire organization towards this vision? And again, how easy it is to have a conversation. By the way, hey, I'm going to pay you half as much as what you got yesterday, but everything's going to be okay. It's not an easy conversation with the translator or project manager. I know you've been quoting for the past 20 years. You're not going to do that anymore, but everything's going to be okay. These aren't easy conversations, right? And the software first approach is what frees up the agency to focus on the true added values. So whether moving from project management to vendor and performance strategy, there's a lot of value in that. But most agencies, if you look at their splits, they have a lot more project managers than they have vendor and performance managers. That's just typically, it's a smaller team in the org. The heavy lifting consumes most of the bandwidth, and the heavy lifting can and should, in my opinion, be software driven. That frees up time for vendor and performance strategy. Instead of quote management, go into client relationship strategy, solutions building. And that involves also training the team, changing the team, what people do, how they think about AI, how they think about solutions, how they think about use cases. So the software first, and that's why the title remains the same, because even what I'm talking about is, if you take a software first approach, that will free up so much bandwidth from you and your team to focus on the stuff that really matters. Again, the challenge of the software first approach is that people have to give up the previous way of working. So instead of looking at the way of working and then looking at software like BureauWorks and saying, how can I port this over? It's inverting it around. It's looking at BureauWorks and saying, what can this tool do for me? And how will I put my things into this tool first? So it's a subtle but gestalt shift as far as how you look at things. And the beautiful thing is, you can scale minimal overhead to complete a project life cycle. Why is this so important? If you're talking about projects that take 2 days and now take 2 hours and cost $200 and now cost $20, you're going to have to process 10 times more projects with the same amount of people. So the only way you can do that is to have software that scales for you, right? And typically, because an agency is so process intensive, if you have 10 times more work, maybe you don't need 10 times more, but you're going to need at least 2, 3, 4, 5 times more project managers to manage that work. We're talking about a world where it scales without scaling overhead. And the beauty is, you can allow hundreds of thousands of small projects to be completed by a small team of exception-based managers. We see scenarios where agencies are able to bring down a team of 10 project managers to 1, depending on how they're working their exceptions, right? So it's super powerful. And when we talk about like the translation agency software, this is what we call a software maturity scale in BureauWorks. It's not a localization maturity, it's software maturity. And most agencies that we know are here in level 3. So they're basically, they have some kind of centralized translation tooling with some integration. So, good example here, maybe they're using Plunet and XTM. Maybe they're using Plunet and Phrase. Maybe they're using blah, blah, blah. That falls here, right? You have some level of integration. You're exchanging log files between these different platforms. The challenge is that none of these platforms were built for the world we are today. They're built for the world we were yesterday, which is full of exceptions, full of being able to do anything with anything. And again, I'm not here to criticize the platforms. The point is, it's a paradigm thing. It's how they were built. They were built for a world that's not today's world. Then going into advanced integration, that's already hard, and few agencies are here. And that requires typically having an engineering team. Very few companies, very few translation agencies have engineering teams with actual full-time developers who are building out tools and integrations and capabilities. Even large ones very rarely have large enough teams to deal with their actual need for that. And this is where they get to comprehensive analytics and automation of routine tasks. We're talking about level 5, this full digital transformation. That's possible, but it requires first and foremost our minds to change about how we think about digital transformation. Instead of trying to go through this scale with the current tooling, it's thinking first, okay, I have to be here. Now what is the tooling that I need? What are the solutions that I need? And in my opinion, the whole thought process is inverted. It's literally upside down. So people are thinking first about their processes, then they're thinking about their current tools, and then they're comparing that to possible tools like us. And what I'm proposing, that it should be the opposite. They should look at us, they should see what they can do with us, explore that business potential, and then see where they are, and then try to bridge that gap together. And again, what's crazy is that this is possible without like a full-time engineering team, without the challenge isn't a financial challenge. The challenge is, how do you change your organization to get here? How do you convince your people? How do you avoid a riot? How do you avoid your translators trashing you on Reddit? That's the problem for level 5, right? Because level 5 is like nuts. You're having 80% profitability. Even if you're charging your clients 5, 6, 7 cents a word, you're still highly profitable, which means your translators are going to have to translate so much more to make their income, which means they're going to be so much less happier with what you do. And the challenge is that whether we want to or not, we're all being pushed into this level, right? And here I am for questions.
Wonderful. We have about 5 minutes for questions. I'm sure there are many. I see right here.
Yes, on level 5, you spent quite a bit of time talking about the adaptability on the agency with the project managers and things, some sort of pain that you have to go through. Level 5, however, I see that there is also a client involvement. Now they have to go to a portal. It's not easy as sending an email. Can you tell us a little bit more about that type of pain, and is it worth it for the client? Because at the end of the day, it's about the client.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I think the question is not if it's worth it for the clients. I think the question is, how do you make it worth it for the clients? So yeah, most clients, they won't want to go through a portal, especially the ideas of portals that people have these days. But the portals that I think of, clients would love to use because they're integrating, first, they're logging in using SSO. Number one, they don't have to remember a password, that's gone. They're logging in using SSO, they're uploading files, they're getting, for instance, a confidence score, they're getting the pre-translated files using our context-sensitive AI, and then they're deciding, and we have this, by the way, we can share this slide later of what this looks like, and then they're deciding or not on the level of human intervention that they want based on this analysis. So, and then if you make it more expensive, which it is more expensive to get a file via email, and you can tell them, oh, you can either go via email and pay us 10% more for project management or whatever, or you can go through a portal, probably they'll start going through the portal. But that's all part of this whole change management thing, which is we're typically geared to, we start with the clients, we look at their requirements, and we pass down those requirements. In my opinion, if we don't also start looking at what our requirements are to fulfill what our clients need, it's an unwinnable battle. Because it's like, dude, you want me to be cheaper, correct? Yes. You want me to be faster, right? I need you to work with me, and I need you to work with my portal. That way, I'll be able to deliver the level of automation and efficiency that you need from me. Those are hard conversations, but in my opinion, my experience, clients appreciate that, because then they're like, they're no longer just reacting to me. They're trying to get me into a framework that's going to deliver what I really want in the end. But that's a great question.
And then we'll go over to the left over here.
Not so much a question, but a comment about what he asked. I'm on the client side, and this is one of the biggest requirements that we have. That we have options for client service capabilities. We want to create our own reports. We don't want to create a ticket to request to the vendor, and they can give it to us in 3 days. No, we want it right there and right now. So for us, for the clients, this is one of the requirements that is most important when we're looking for new vendors.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And we're going to span the room over this side and then all the way over here.
Hi, I have a question for Gabriel. I know Gabriel for 10 years and he's been doing this since I know him. But what would you tell those that love what you just see and want to get started? Like, can you think of yourself 10 years back and say, I'm going to start this process?
Oh, that's a hard question, Javi.
And you can start by buying euros.
No, but I would love to say that it's just by bureaus, but it's much harder than that because we do this like easily. And like I said, I think the hard part is, I actually love your question, Javi. I think the hard part is believing in your vision and knowing what your vision is, and that's my opinion, that's the hardest part. If you're committed to a vision and you know that you don't want to sell your agency for pennies on the dollar, you know that you don't want to shut down your business, you know that you don't want to let go of your key people, you know that you want to keep working with your clients, and you're figuring out a way to do that, that's to me where it starts. It's like having that clarity and leaving this reactivity zone where like you're seeing revenues go down and you're seeing things happen and you're trying to just tweak things here and there and like looking at it, being ready. I'm going to commit to the plunge. I'm going to do it. That's the hardest part, and I think that's the starting point. Because then after that, things become easier. Because then every single conversation after that, and that's why it's a super cool question, because most implementations that we have are from agencies that have very mature leadership, because they know what they want. They have a vision, and they're just implementing it. Versus agencies, and this is very typical for translation agencies, they're not necessarily top-down driven. Project managers have a lot of say. Operations managers used to be project managers. CEOs don't like to just piss off everybody and lay off half the staff. It's not a cutthroat business like other spaces. And I think it doesn't have to be, but I think the vision for what the agency has to be, that's the starting point. Great question.
So this will be our last question, but remember that we can keep the conversations going all day outside of this room, and we want to leave just a few seconds at the end for applause.
Well, thank you. I'm Camilo Munoz from Spanish ACT. Great presentation. I love it. I have two questions. One has to do with quality. So we're going to be teaching our translators about edit distance and so on and so forth, and we're going to be paying them less. Who checks the quality and how, what if there are ways to game the system, right? Because I imagine that edit distance, that's not exactly always equate to quality, right?
Of course not.
So that's one question, is how to handle that part. The second part is we notice that there are different types of clients. Some of the clients that we have and we all have inefficiencies in that, right? I mean, go and tell a government employee to go and go full digital, it's not going to happen. And some clients need project management services from us and so on. So would you suggest a second kind of a two-tier system, one for like the new technology and one for the traditional people that are not going away but are not going to fit here?
Great questions. I'll start from the second one because I think it's the easiest one to answer. So I think that if you figure out, and this is the beauty of thinking about automation and efficiency, if you figure out, start with what can be automated, do that, and then treat the rest as a separate kind of business, that works. Because then that initial business will work so smoothly that it will require so little overhead, so little oversight, that it becomes the cash cow that's going to fuel the growth of the other parts of the business. So yeah, 100%, I wouldn't obliterate, but then you can make a cost-benefit decision. Does it make sense for me to also run these less efficient, effective parts of my business? You may decide to let go of them altogether in the future, maybe sell them off, etc. But yeah, I think start with what you can fully get here and leave the rest for later for sure. The first question is also a great question. I loved it because I think quality management is a huge science, and that's also part of the reason why all of us here have a lot of value. It's hard to figure out, and what is quality anyway, right? It's like the end client liking the text. The text, that to me is quality. If they like it, it's great. I don't care if it says, turd in the middle of the text. If they love it, it's good. And I agree with you. It's not. There's no single measure for edit distance, no correlation with quality. True. No causation with quality. True. Yes, correlation with quality. And if you start to look at data science, and we do offer that, for instance, in BureauWorks, if you start looking at edit distance, edit time, if you look at the kinds of edits that are being performed, you can within a very good, reasonable margin, at least detect anomalous translations and flag them for additional review. You can make sure that any kind of feedback is really well incorporated, and really develop that side. See, we're most used to quality management as a very qualitative thing, and analyzing, oh, is this right? Is this wrong? Does this make sense? Does this make it better? Is it a fluency change, typographical change, etc.? I'm now talking about data management, quality management, which is data-driven quality management, which is looking at the behavior in, for instance, BureauWorks, and understanding what kind of behavior produces good outcomes in legal English into Japanese versus in marketing English into Spanish, and so on. And then once you have those benchmarks established, then, for instance, your project managers, they'll be able to observe this data and they'll be able to make decisions on, maybe this file, I'm not going to deliver it directly, I will add an additional scrutiny, or I will review. And then the other thing is that all of this data then is collected by BureauWorks, for instance, and used to generate the next set of decisions. So you know that, for instance, if a translator, for instance, was performing poorly yesterday, they're likely not to be eligible for a task today. Most of our quality management is based on reputation and not doing shitty. So for instance, if you have a translator who tested really well 10 years ago and is always available and has done a great job, no client has ever complained, that's a great translator. And that's not a real measure of quality. That just means that they've survived certain empirical tests. So yeah, I love that question, and I really think it's about developing this data-driven quality management.
Wonderful, and Gabriel, BureauWorks, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.